In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, and we are live with the wonderful Precog Vision as usual. No Tyler today; he's busy, but we have as our guest Super Review. So, what we're gonna do is I got a bunch of questions for him, and then I figure afterwards we'll get into the chat and do some Q&A. I see Crin's in the chat. Apparently he's nocturnal. I'm
3 a.m. there.
Yeah, I'm assuming that he's got us, the live stream up on his TV on his wall, and he's just, getting some headphone show in before bed. Okay, so yeah, I guess my first question for you, Super, is how, like, first of all, who are you? And how did you get into reviewing, and yeah, just sort of what's your background in, I guess, the headphone world?
Sure. So my name's Mark Ryan Salee. I live in California, San Francisco Bay Area. I've been here for actually about almost 17 years now. Wow. That almost makes me feel like a native. But the audio stuff, I actually, I'm somewhat of a newbie into, to be honest. And even like starting this YouTube channel, Super Review, was kind of the start of my audio journey, you could say. I had before that, I think I had a pair of Grado SR80s that I had bought like maybe 2011. And that for me was kind of like my first foray into hi-fi. I still actually like the Grados, but I know that they're a bit of a acquired taste, I suppose. But maybe that's where my bass light preferences come from. And Grado is definitely not the bassiest headphone. But anyway, for years, I had those Grados and I was happy with them. And I just kind of had in my mind the thought that there was no reason for me to have more than one headphone. So like every once in a while, I would see people talking about, oh, the M50X. This is the audiophile headphone. Like, it doesn't make sense for me to buy another headphone. And then I think a bunch of people at work ended up getting the M50Xs, and I heard them. I'm like, I don't actually like this. And I think that got me a little bit curious to just like try more headphones. And so I also had a coworker at the time that would come into work with a different pair of Bluetooth headphones every day. I was like, oh, maybe it's okay to have more than one headphone. But I still had to justify it to my wife, for whom, buying more than one headphone doesn't make a ton of sense. So I was like, I'm going to do reviews on YouTube. And that's kind of how the channel started. I mean, I'd been doing YouTube before that, actually, like a photography-based channel that I was doing for a few years, but I'd kind of fallen out of photography. And I still wanted to do YouTube. I still wanted to kind of be, kind of have like this productive function in my evenings that wasn't spent doom scrolling on Twitter, which at the time, 2017, I think was around when I started Super Review. At the time, Twitter started just not being a fun place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted something else to do. And I was like, all right, I'll start reviewing just the random dumb stuff I buy on Amazon, which at the time I was interested in Bluetooth headphones, but that kind of turned in, it snowballed out of control.
Right. So I mean, I think that's a unique. It's unique in the headphone world. It's funny. I'm talking to a lot of other reviewers. They sort of fell into it through the gaming world, right? And then they, eventually kind of moved into it because that was their primary use for headphones. And then they realized that there's another level to the headphones that they could get, and the sound quality they could get. That's in many ways kind of how I fell into it as well. But
Interesting.
You've been doing this now for 3 years? You said 2017.
Yeah, I think that was when I started the channel.
Yeah. Is this sort of like your main thing, or is this just on the side, or?
Oh, yeah, this is very much on the side. I 9 to 5 work a fairly typical job in product management, sort of in the internet web space.
Cool. Yeah. It's awesome what you've done with the channel. I mean, in just 3 years, it's I think you're at over 40,000 subscribers now. It's
Yeah, it's weird too the way that the subscriber count goes up. I mean, in a lot of ways, so like I would say in the past year, I've kind of just fully committed myself to audio because while the channel started with me, reviewing Bluetooth headphones, I think I mentioned I
Yeah.
was really just going to review just whatever random stuff I bought. So I was reviewing smartphones a lot or other tech gadgets. And frankly, that kind of stuff drives subscriptions more than audio, which maybe is not too surprising.
Yeah, no, it makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, I was even just
That
like
AirPods
scroll.
Max videos, like,
Yeah, yeah.
doing crazy well right now for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
But yeah, you did some phone reviews that I saw, and of course those ones have tons of views. It's no wonder that like the MKBHDs of the world and like the tech tubers are focused on that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. The one that actually still surprises me, that blew up, probably was my first big video, was my Walkman A45 review.
Oh,
oh,
really?
interesting.
Which I'm sure there are more people have watched that video than have ever bought a Walkman.
Yeah,
Well, at least in like the last 5 years.
yeah. Interesting. I mean, probably also in part because the Walkman has such a name
It's got that
behind it.
nostalgia
Yeah.
behind it too, I think. Yeah, even I had one of them. It was like,
Buy a Walkman in 2020 for, I guess, well, now 2021 for $1,000.
Exactly.
It's a bit, yeah.
Exactly.
Everybody remembers the small. But actually, I wanted to say, like, on the style of your reviews, one of the things that I really appreciate is they're very, and maybe you don't think about this, but they're very friendly. And it's a bit weird because in this world, in this space, there seems to be a trend for people who talk from a position of knowledge about audio. There's sort of an authoritative way that they do that. And you obviously have now a lot of experience with a ton of different stuff, but you've maintained that sort of kind of friendly, live, like, hey, let's just talk about, the experience. Is that something that you're sort of consciously doing, or is it just, the person that you are?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think, like I mentioned, like the YouTube channel is kind of my start into like really learning about audio, and I knew, like, I went into it knowing that this is a world that I do not know anything about, and I'm happy to talk about it as a person that doesn't know anything about it and just kind of learning things. Like I knew what I like to hear,
Yeah.
but the language around describing it, why a thing was doing a thing, how it should sound, like that kind of stuff. Is very much, a thing I was learning for at least a couple of years doing the channel. Now I'm, obviously I still feel like I'm learning all the time, but I do feel more confident talking, using audiophile terms, et cetera, and assuming that the thing I'm describing is going to be roughly the way that you would describe it. Or hear it on your end. So, so part of it comes from that, the learning. I think part of it also comes from when I was doing photography as a YouTube channel. I feel like I kind of fell into a bit of, and I think you see this, I don't think I was unique to me. Maybe I'm just deflecting, but I kind of fell into just saying what other people were saying about things. Like I might make an assessment about something that, I don't know. It's very easy to do that. And I wanted to, I don't know, I kind of found myself like looking back at some older content I had done and be like, I don't know if I would support that anymore.
yeah, I totally feel that too. I know when I first started out, I was constantly looking at other people's impressions and seeing how they would line up with my own, because I don't personally have a good basis at that point in time. Yeah.
And it's interesting, even among like all the other different reviewers that we like, there's definitely reviewers who we don't take as seriously because we know it's not as honest of a opinion, but they're among the people who we do take seriously. There's disagreement there as well, and it's fun to sort of see how people had those different impressions and where they came from. I mean, even Precog and I will have differing opinions on IEMs. Like he's not a fan of the Campfire Aura, for example. And I can understand why. And I while it's not my personal preference either, I think there's an audience for it. I like to call it the boomer audiophiles.
Boomer audience, yeah.
yeah. But
that's totally fair too. I
Yeah,
totally get
yeah.
that as well, man. It's just all about being able to respect others' opinions when it comes to this stuff.
Exactly. And that seems also to be kind of like, I'm just contrasting it with, again, those more like authoritative takes where it's almost like a matter of like ego and pride, where people are like, I know more about, when it comes to audio, I know things. Like all that stuff is just, it's nice when that stuff kind of just falls away and you realize that like people can have different impressions, and it makes that, friendly style kind of all the more important.
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to ask, you mentioned, you brought up a bunch of like learning about all the audiophile terms and stuff like that. I think that tends to be a bit of a sore point for a lot of people who maybe aren't as like steeped in the rhetoric. And you, as you said, you've gone through the process of like trying to make sense of these, and now you're using them a little bit more, regularly, more commonly. And I'm in a process right now where I'm like, so for example, I'm trying to evaluate this. This is the Amps and Sound Ken Z amplifier behind me. And I'm trying to evaluate this, and like normally I try to anchor my evaluations, impressions to things that are a little bit more like grounded than, stridency, like as an example, right? And I'm struggling so hard because the only words that I can come up with are these typical audiophile terms, because the seed's already been planted there in my mind. I'm like, okay, that's supposed to be correlated with this, but terms like sweetness and euphony and all the rest of this stuff that doesn't really have as much grounding as something where we can look at a frequency response chart. I'm almost left kind of at a loss for how else to describe these things, because, unless we're just, holding up charts and data and stuff like that, which even in this case seems impossible, that's sort of all we really have is metaphors. But I mean, I suppose that's not really a question. It's more just an observation. But do you think that, I mean, like one of the challenges or one of the potential wins for reviewers is trying to find ways of I guess transcending these audiophile terms, or is this just something that we all have to get on board with eventually?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily a problem to use these terms. I think there's some of them I still don't know what they mean. Like you mentioned sweetness. I have no idea what someone means when they're describing a sound as being sweet or emotional.
Yeah.
Okay.
But even something like texture, right? Or like,
I think texture is one I use.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of challenges in that, one, we all have different anatomy and we hear things slightly differently. There's just the fact that this language of describing audio is, it's learned and it's particular to audio. And if you're not used to describing audio, or if your frame of reference is just the M50Xs,
right.
Like, how do I tell you what something else sounds like? If it's this congested, kind of closed in your mind, it's like, this is the best sounding thing I've ever heard. And it's well, it's difficult. I don't think that it's necessarily bad to have this language. And like you pointed out, like I am adopting more of it, but just to be mindful of when you're communicating with someone, like they might not have that common ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, you mentioned congested, and that's a perfect way of describing the M50X. Actually, we were just talking about, I'm wearing the HD650s and you got the HD600s, and you're definitely on the HD600 train. Is there any particular reason, or you just happen to love that headphone, or?
It's the granite pattern, really.
Oh, specifically, the marble countertop.
Exactly. No, so I work with a guy who happened to have been into audio much longer than I was. He had a pretty big library of headphones and stuff in it. And he was kind enough to bring that stuff into the office and let me test it. And I knew the Sennheiser HD 600s and the 6XX were both like pretty popular among audiophiles. And so he brought in the 6XX, the 600s, and the 58X as well. And I spent some time listening to all three of them. And for me, the 600 was the standout. Like that was the one that I wanted to keep going back to. And I was like, I've already got plenty of headphones, but I got to buy that one.
Fair enough.
Yeah. It's the mid-range texture and the forwardness.
Yeah. Actually, Precog's now getting into over-ear headphones as well, so we'll have to.
Yeah, we bit.
Yeah, you got the HD 800s now, or 800S?
Yeah, the 800S here right now, but my amp broke down actually.
Oh
so
no!
I've been running it out of the DX 160, so I don't think that's exactly ideal.
Probably not. I mean, HD 800S it's only okay. You only went for like the highest end Sennheiser.
Yeah. They got to follow up with something for the HD 800S, man. I'm just like waiting. Well, it's been their standard for like how many years now?
It's been gosh, I don't even know. 10 years at least, right? Oh, maybe not the HE800S, because the HE800 at least 10 years.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's true.
But the HE800S would have been less than that. Somebody in the chat can let us know exactly when that came out.
Jamie, look that up.
Yeah. Normally, it's too bad we don't have Tyler on here because I do that. No, we got to have the Chronicle X Sennheiser HG 850 coming out. That's the new.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Don't. Somebody's gonna be like, wait, what? But yeah,
Sennheiser stonks.
Yeah, Tyler says food descriptions are the way in audio. Corinne says that as well. Yeah, I think it's just sort of going back to that, like, the metaphors and stuff like that. Like, I think we have to use metaphors. This is just sort of my personal take on it, but like, I think at some point we have to, because there's no other way to sort of anchor this to familiar experiences in other categories. And I love actually that you did the photography stuff before, because in so many ways, like, I love to use like optic references as like descriptors for things like detail versus resolution, because like humans are more visually oriented than anything else, right? And so it's much easier to sort of like draw the comparison there with visual stuff. And I even just like a term like resolution, we know that is something that makes sense in the visual space, right? And drawing that analogy to something in the audio world, I mean, regardless of like how we define it, there is some sort of sense of that, like, image fidelity being better in the visual space, and now we get better fidelity in the audio space when we have better, resolution, or sharpness and detail or something like that, right? I'm sure that we can slice it any different way, but it's nice that we can have that frame of reference.
A set of terms I've started using, I don't know if they're actually helpful, but they're not unique to me, but that I've carried over from the photography world, is like the concept of macro contrast and micro contrast.
Yes, I love those. Those are perfect. Yeah.
Why, like, for me, macro contrast is just like it's like taking the contrast slider in Lightroom and just boosting it up, right? And micro contrast is more about the perception of the details and the finer bits. Yeah.
What's another word for that? I mean, they've always described like micro contrast as like image fidelity, but I think isn't local contrast another term for that? Yeah, where it's like the much smaller, finer contrast. I love that kind of stuff, because that's why I always use like the more shades in the gradient means is better than fewer shades in the gradient. That kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know, Precog, what's your thoughts on audio filter? I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Yeah, sure. Well, like you said, I do think that there is a sort of a necessity to appeal to people who maybe don't have as much experience with all these terms, and being able to lay out the groundwork, and then slowly, I think you can sort of maybe build up on that and introduce more nuanced terms and lingo that goes with the hobby. But yeah, there is definitely a balance that you have to strike, like with anything else to it. And I know from firsthand experience, and I'm sure we all know from firsthand experience, the difficulty when you're first starting out of getting used to all these terms.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and like realistically, you have to consider that the people that you're talking, like if you want your audience to just be people that have as much frame of reference as you as a reviewer, like that's a very narrow audience.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And this is something I'm discovering as well, is that like no matter how much effort I put into trying to create educational stuff, or just how I use terms, there's inevitably going to be people who don't think of it that way. So
Yeah.
there's no way to sort of reach everybody, and just because you've said something once doesn't mean that you're finished saying that. Which can be a bit challenging at times. But actually, I wanted to mention it. Both Precog and I use measurement systems, and for your reviews, Super, I've actually always been impressed with the accuracy of your descriptions when you're just when you're talking about like bass, mids, and treble and that kind of stuff. But do you rely on measurements at all? Do you put stock in measurements, or is this something you just don't care about at all?
No, I do definitely look at measurements a lot. I rely on Critical's website for looking at that stuff. Most of the time, that said, I do have an IEC. I have a coupler, so I'll do measurements for myself. There have been a couple of videos where, like, if I just want to do like an unboxing video, it's not that interesting because I can't tell you what this thing sounds like unless I spend some time listening to it.
Right.
So I have incorporated measurements into like those videos to give people some sense, but so yes, I do look at measurements. They definitely inform my interpretation of the audio, but I think there's also a risk that measurements can over-inform your interpretation. And a lot of the times, like, if you rely on the measurement too much, one, you might end up describing a thing in a way that a person who's not familiar with measurements won't be able to interpret. But I think also there's a lot lost in, measurements, they'll show you the frequency response and the tonality, but there's a lot more to the audio that's not really captured there. And if that's all you describe, one, you're not doing much better than just going to Critical's website and clicking on a graph.
Yeah.
But there's also the possibility that you're describing a thing that is being recorded by a device that might not actually be perceived by a human, or at least your anatomy.
Especially for over-ear headphones, because the coupling is, we know what the coupling is in given conditions when it's on the device, right? At least ideally. But we don't know what that coupling is going to be for every single person. And, this is something actually where I'd love to do more research on it, but you know how, like, we say that people have people hear things differently. They have different perceptions and impressions of things, and I think one of the most significant reasons for this is probably due to the coupling differences that we have. Even just something as simple as the driver being a little bit further away from the ears, or closer, or whatever, right? Because the clamp is different. That, I think, can have a pretty significant impact. So, we might know what it looks like in the conditions of it being on the rig, but we don't know what that's going to translate to when the conditions are on that specific person's head. Right. So I think that's that. But as you're saying, the other thing is, like, there is definitely a limitation as far as, like, speaking to people about measurements who A, don't care, but B, it's like you have to go through that whole process of education for every single person every time you do it. Where there's it's nicer if we can just sort of give descriptions of what the experience is like, because that's what a wider segment of the audience cares about. But that's just another sort of observation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you use EQ at all when you're doing your just personal listening?
Pretty rare for me to use EQ. Part of it is like, I jump between different sources. Yeah. Right. I use portable sources a lot, which just don't have very fine grained EQ options a lot of the time. So that's part of it. And then part of it too is I hate, like, forgetting that I left an EQ on, switching headphones, and then, like, this
is weird.
Day into listening to it, you're like, what is going on? And I left the EQ on. Like, I hate that. So that's part of it. If I was, like, dedicated to one device and one headphone, like, I don't have any sort of philosophical qualms with EQ, but just kind of, like, as a practical thing for me, I don't really do it.
Yeah. I always find for IEMs, like, I just don't. It's like there are some exceptions, like the Tin Hi-Fi P2 is one that, because it's like there's no way that is a portable device. Like, that is a desktop, or with an amplifier. Like, it requires crazy amounts of power. And for those situations, I don't mind because I would never take it portably. But for any of the stuff like IEMs or any portable headphones, I don't bother. But actually, Precog, I forget if I've asked you this. Do you do EQ?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
No EQ gang here.
No.
I'm with Tyler on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean,
Well,
if I had headphones and I listened to them at my desktop all day, yeah, I don't mind using EQ. But with IEMs, it's kind of, I don't know, feels off a little bit.
Why is that? So you both said that it's different for you with IEM. Sorry, I don't mean to become the interviewer.
No, by all means.
No.
No, but it's as you said,
guess,
it's the portable use case.
Yeah.
Devices and things like that. And I know Wavelet for Android is like it's better for this, but I just find it's like it all comes down to the interface and convenience for me. Also, the fact that we're in a pandemic means I've just been walking around outside less. So, in general, not wanting to worry about that inconvenience, which I totally
convenience
understand.
factor is the big one. Like I don't even know if there's a good EQ on iOS really, because it doesn't even sync up with what I use for my listening mainly on Apple Music. So it's just like,
the portable device that has the best EQ functionality that I've seen is this ES100. Maybe there's better.
Oh, really?
But the ES100, there's again, I don't know about iOS, but there's an app for this that's absolutely fantastic, and you get all the customizability you would want.
Man, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
that is really interesting.
There's also the Qtelix that
has,
I think, very similar functionality. I have the S100. I don't really use it very much, but the Qtelix has PEQ, parametric, so
perfect.
You get a little bit better control if you know what you're doing, which I don't.
But see, that's what I maybe this just sort of is telling for like the way that I use and appreciate technology, but like I love it if the option is there. Like I don't care if it's like, okay, buried in whatever settings. I just want there to be the option to do this, because it feels like there are so many times when the devices are just like not set up for that, where it's like, most people aren't going to want to use that, and they don't know how to use that, even if it was there, which is true. But at the very least, they should just include something there for the people who do want to.
Is this you saying why you're not an Apple user?
In part, but also even I was actually more specifically thinking about like DAPs and stuff like that, because like there are DAPs like the Aslan Kern that have built-in EQ stuff, but then there's also DAPs out there that have nothing, and I just think to myself, why? Like even if I personally wouldn't use it, because again, for most DAPs I probably wouldn't even use it, even with ANK stuff, but just because of the use case, right, and convenience. But I like the option if it were there, right? And I'm just thinking about the people who they only have a DAP and they have portable headphones or IEMs. That would make it a lot easier. But at the same time, like I always struggle with this. I struggle with balancing a recommendation based on how it sounds with my EQ versus the realistic situation of most people not using EQ. And then you have headphones like the Odyssey LCD2 and whatnot, where I think it's a requirement, and I don't really know how to approach that yet. I'm still sort of figuring that out.
I mean, I think as long as you're honest and transparent with what your recommendation is, it's like, I love this headphone, but I use it with EQ. I think that's the person on the other end of it can make whatever sense they need to.
I think the counter argument is that in theory, every headphone that has a weird frequency response, the answer could be, this is a great headphone if you EQ it. It's my conclusion. All headphones are good if you use EQ. That's actually not true, but
it's not.
But I have some more questions for you. Might as well get into. But you've been, as you're saying, you've been doing this for 3 years now, and you've experienced a fairly wide range of stuff. If you were to like point to like your favorite headphone experience, like maybe a headphone off of a specific amplifier or DAC, or like an IEM, a specific IEM that you loved, like what would your favorite headphone experience be so far?
Like what was my favorite moment in time that I experienced a headphone, and what were
well, both. So just like if you could,
Okay. I mean, that's a tough one for me to answer. Hmm. Maybe the first time I heard the Grados, like honestly, like it's a headphone I still own. It's not a headphone
Yeah.
I use often anymore, but um, I remember getting that headphone, and I had previously like random, occasionally tried experiencing or getting other headphones and just generally being disappointed. The Grado was like the first headphone. I was like, oh, this is different. And
Yeah.
I think it was my first open back headphone, honestly.
Right. And if you like now thinking about all the stuff that you've listened to since then, is there anything that stands out, or would you say just the HD 600 and that experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's other things that are fun. The HD 600 is like honestly the headphone I still keep coming back to.
Yeah.
It doesn't do bass the strongest, but for me that's not my priority. And like the parts that it does do well are generally the things that I like the best. So.
Fair enough. Are you somebody who focuses on, let's say, trying to get it to be neutral for your ideal experience, or your version, whatever neutral is, or are you someone who enjoys the more flavor oriented stuff?
Generally I prefer a neutral sound, but it's not like, for me, I know for a lot of people it's like this pursuit of some sort of objective truth, or it's not that for me. For me, it's just much more about, I think a lot of the music I like is around vocals and vocal tracks, and a lot of female vocals. So a lot of my audio preferences, I think, lean toward that.
Yeah, actually that's another big point, is like how the genres and the types of music. I know that there's like some theory out there that it shouldn't matter on the genre, right? And headphones should be just the headphones, and it should be good for all music, which maybe, but like I always find that, like, because I have such a weird taste in like different styles, and I'm not just pinned to one genre, I tend to switch it up just for the stuff that I listen to classic rock with is not going to be the stuff that I listen to jazz or acoustic with. So I do think it has some sort of influence. For if you could review like any headphone, like, is there something that sticks out that you like on your list for 2021 that you're like, I really want to try that out, or even if it's not to review, but just like to try it?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I know there's a number of IEMs that I'm interested in trying, like the Sony, the M9, the Z1R. I'm interested in trying some of that high-end stuff. Actually, through Precog, shout out, have been able to hear some like 64 audio stuff, which I hadn't heard before.
Yeah.
So recently heard the U12T, which is as good as people say.
Did you hear Precog?
Yeah.
And then you also heard the Earl Koenig and the Odin and the
oh wow,
I don't remember what it was.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just went over with like a crap ton of like $8,000 worth of IEMs, and I just like slapped them out.
Yeah.
Just casually, yeah.
Just in your backpack, walking.
Yeah.
$8,000 worth.
That was definitely interesting.
Yeah, it was fun, and it was satisfying in the sense that like most of the stuff I listen to is not that expensive, but also in a sense like so of all the IEMs that you brought over that day, so there was the U12T, I think the Neo, the Earl Koenig you mentioned, and the Odin. The U12T was frankly the only one that I heard I was like, oh, I kind of want to spend this kind of money to buy this.
Yeah.
The other ones, like frankly, I was like, I can see that they're doing things technically better than some other things, but like even the Odin, I felt like tonally, I was like, I don't really think I could enjoy this that much. Definitely wouldn't spend, I don't know, what is it, like $3,800 or something like that?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I have a similar kind of opinion on a lot of that stuff where I get it, like the rationale from a manufacturer is probably if they make something that they think is the best, period, then there's justification for pricing it at whatever ridiculous price there is. But personally, as like somebody who buys audio stuff, I would never spend that kind of money on an IEM.
Yeah.
Like that's insane to me. The U12T is different, I think, because it's so versatile, and to me it is kind of like the end game IEM still, like even after all this time having other IEMs that come out that maybe technically perform better in, you know, one area or another. The tuning of the U12T just is so agreeable that it's the one that kind of like is different from all those other ones, in my opinion. But
it was definitely a standout.
Yeah.
But so I guess maybe to answer your question another way, like you asked, you know, what are the things I'm looking forward to?
Yeah.
Honestly, not particularly. Like
there's nothing that you got your eyes on for this coming year.
Yeah, maybe I'm just not paying enough attention to what's on the horizon. I mean, I'm interested in trying anything new.
Yeah.
But like it's hard for me to get excited about things, I guess, until impressions start coming in.
Right.
And you hear someone talking about something, like, oh, you got to hear this. It's like, all right, cool.
Yeah, that's true.
I suppose speaking of the, you know, stuff coming out for this year, you know, a lot of stuff. It seems like even in the like high-end audiophile space, there's a push from a lot of manufacturers to, you know, cross over to the wireless or noise canceling, you know, more consumer-focused stuff. Well, I don't know. They're probably not trying to make it more consumer-focused, but they're trying to build in some of the convenience aspects of that with, you know, the good sound quality stuff. And I wanted to get your take on where you think the industry is heading with this. I mean, not just that, but also stuff like, for example, many headphones coming out at lower impedances to be more efficient and easier to drive, much to the, you know, distaste of all the audiophiles who have ridiculous amps and stuff like that. You know, do you, I guess, where do you see the industry going in, you know, over the next like 5 years?
Okay, wow. I'll say I definitely have not put much thought into that ahead of time. No, it's fine. I mean, on the topic of Bluetooth, the way that you're describing it just kind of like stood out to me as like, there's some parallels with, you could say like the auto industry and electrification of cars, right? It's like, there's these more traditional car manufacturers, Toyota, Ford, et cetera, that know they have to do this because kind of inevitably this is the future. And right. I think that is probably the case with wireless audio. But, you know, V1, V2, maybe V5 are not going to be comparable to the thing that it's replacing.
Right, right.
Meanwhile, there's always the risk of a Tesla popping up and showing you that it's not just as good, it's actually better in a lot of ways than what you're used to. And I don't think that's happened in the audio space yet. I don't think there's anything Bluetooth that, you know, blows away the HD 800, but maybe that's possible. I think we're gonna have to get past LDAC for that to be possible. But
yeah. I said this before, but I think Odyssey is well positioned to do this more so than anybody else because they're really trying. And I think I mean they've got the Mobius and the Penrose now. I still don't think that those would be like if they were to come out with like a noise canceling one. I still don't think that the experience would be better than the HD 800. Mm-hmm. But it is an interesting parallel with the automotive industry with as you're saying, like right now all the stuff that's out, like even like the AirPods Max or the you know, Bose and Sony and stuff, or actually I have here the wonderful Drop Panda which is one of the least detailed headphones I've ever come across. Have you had a chance to hear it?
Yeah, I actually got one a couple weeks ago.
I don't know, this is one where like everything about it is so excellent, like as far as the form factor and like convenience, and then I listened to it and I was like, how maybe you have a different opinion. I don't want to like you know, color anything, but like, man, it just, when I hear that, I think there's still distance. There's still some, or even not just that, I shouldn't rag on that too much in this, but all of those noise canceling headphones, like, you know, the QC35s of the world, even though this isn't noise canceling, but the wireless stuff, the feature rich stuff, none of it has been able to actually get there yet.
Yeah, there's a number of compromises and things that make it difficult. I mean, the fact that it's a closed back headphone, at least for me, starters, like that, that instantly lowers my expectations. Yeah. But I also just kind of had like a counter thought to, you know, I described Bluetooth as sort of the inevitable reality, or wireless at least. Mm-hmm. But another big challenge is, you know, maybe it's not just the bit rate of LDAC or Bluetooth codecs or anything like that. There's also the fact that all the the DAC and the amplification has to happen inside the ear cup of the thing you're wearing.
It's physically constrained as far as size for that as well.
Right. So you're not just comparing this headphone and the bit rate of the audio versus, a desktop setup, but you're comparing the little itty bitty amplifiers in here to potentially goofy desktop setups, tubes, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, well, you probably won't get the tube experience at least.
Just wait.
Strapping tubes to the
Cayenne will make a headphone with tubes poking out the sides.
Yeah, it might be a little warm, but
I'm gonna try it.
Yeah. But I was going to say that there's also now like Hi-Fi Man's solution to this, where they just I mean, it's a really niche thing I find with the open back, and they do have the closed back now. Sorry, it's behind me there. But with the open back wireless thing, and then the Blue Mini, and as much as like the products themselves that have come out with this, well, I guess specifically the Deva and the R10, they, to me, like, I don't think they've been huge successes or anything, but in principle, the idea of we'll just put on this little adapter thing to make wireless possible, so we don't have to incur these challenges that we would normally when trying to put it into the headphone itself. And to me, there's something elegant about that, even though, I know it's cheating. It's not technically a wireless headphone. It's like wireless capable. But, given the constraints that exist acoustically, that is an interesting approach, I think.
Right. And kind of back to that car analogy, like, I think that's like them figuring out different, like, that's why they have to do this stuff now. They have to figure out what does Hi-Fi Man look like in 10 years when everything is wireless. You got to do the baby steps.
Right.
And I do also like that idea of the external amp and Bluetooth module, because not only do you avoid the challenges of, one ear cup having slightly different internal acoustics, it's now also upgradable, right?
Yeah, that's
like if they come out with a new module, they can improve the amplification, they can improve the Bluetooth, without you having to buy a new headphone, and it makes it a little bit more future-proof.
Yeah. Well, I'm just hoping that they, put it into better headphones, but if they can do like a Sandara or I don't know, just Hi-Fi Man Sisvara or something like that, which they probably can't yet, but one day maybe.
I can see why not. I guess it depends. It's all down to the power output capabilities of that unit.
And actually, the Blue Mini is surprisingly powerful because the Deva does. If you just wire the Deva up, it does take power. Like not that much, but an amp is still a good idea. But also, I wanted to mention that like there's what Odyssey has been doing with DSP, and you mentioned the asymmetry of certain headphones like the Sony XM4 and many of these ones that have the sort of like sensing stuff or like the smart features, and that those sensors require an asymmetry in the cups, and even just the electronics in general require an asymmetry, and that leads to channel imbalances and weird stuff showing up in the FR that then gets fixed by the electronic, the DSP and stuff like that actively, and that's another interesting idea that kind of goes back towards the automotive comparison, which would be like, or maybe like in the self-driving aspect of it, or I don't know, just something like that, where like there's some way of optimizing the tuning and frequency response electronically. But actually I think that's a really interesting and complicated question, and this is another reason why I think Odyssey is sort of on the forefront of that, because they're already kind of doing that with like their cipher cables and stuff like that. So I think it's just a matter of what the next step is there.
It's also, it kind of brings up like that purist debate of is DSP a good thing or a bad thing?
Right.
Is there some quality that's worth preserving in that raw analogness, right? And I think that carries over in the audio world as well. The auto world, not the audio world, the car world. The electric cars may be the future, but they don't have manual stick shifts, and it's like that's definitively slower and worse, and it's more work.
Worse on fuel economy.
Sports,
right.
With sports cars, like everybody wants manual stick shift. It's just part of what the experience and all that you want to keep. But,
right.
There's always going to be the purists out there. I mean, we still have people who are into vinyl and analog everything, And yeah, even though, there's, we're now at a completely different age as far as like digital streaming for music and stuff like that goes, right? And music availability, that it's not enough to convince people that who are really firmly entrenched in that, in the fully analog world. So there's always, I think, going to be purists, but I can absolutely see the I guess the overall like demographic of the audience that are into headphones, wired headphones with amplifiers, growing smaller. And that is a bit of a concern for me, because I think that's still where the best experiences are. So maybe I'm a purist in that sense.
Yeah, I probably am in my own ways, not necessarily dogmatically or sort of as a philosophical thing. It's just like my preferences.
Yeah.
I have a manual stick shift car because that to me
feels like driving.
That's what driving is. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a manual stick shift car because I can't afford anything else, but
that used to be the case. There was a car I bought where the manual actually cost more.
Yeah, manuals cost more nowadays on some cars.
Crazy. Yeah. But yeah, I wanted to get back to IEMs a little bit. There's the true wireless earbud conversation. That I do think has made a pretty big change. I mean, even the last few years in many people's lives, where the convenience of even something like the AirPods Pro or the Galaxy, whatever the TWS of those is, the convenience of that, I think, is something that the industry has gone, whoa, that makes sense, because for people who are just about to leave the house, which again maybe aren't doing as much these days, but being able to throw those into a pocket and off you go is just super convenient. And there's a big question, I think, on everybody's mind as to what the best true wireless noise canceling IEMs are, or true wireless IEMs. And from the stuff that you've experienced, what do you think? I'll ask Precog the same question, actually.
The one that I use the most is AirPods Pro.
Yeah.
It's a good decent sound. It's not super exciting, and I'll be honest, I don't listen to music on them very much. Most of my Bluetooth usage is podcasts or YouTube. Right. But they're good sounding. I think if I was purely listening to music, I'd prefer the Galaxy Buds Plus.
Okay.
But I don't use those daily as much, largely because they're just so easy to accidentally touch the play buttons when I'm putting them in my ears.
Right. I haven't had a chance to hear those yet, but I'm pretty sure Android has been all about them. So I don't want to.
Yeah, the Galaxy Buds are good. They're really good, actually. Unexpectedly good, to the point of which they compete with a lot of wired stuff at that price point.
It's funny. I was defending the Harman tuning, sort of, in some forum.
How dare you?
Yeah, in some forum discussion. Not so much what the result was, but more the method, I guess. And I think one of the criticisms was use the Samsung Galaxy Buds as that was the foil, I suppose. And and then and I think I mistakenly said, yeah, that's probably not appropriate for us audiophiles. And then Android corrected me by saying, actually, let me tell you. So
it's not bad.
Yeah. Oh, there he is. He's in the chat right now.
G-Buds Pro is coming out. Buy it.
Yeah, maybe totally appropriate. Okay, so I'm now going to turn it over to the chat. We've been going for about an hour, so guys, if you guys have questions for Super or Precog or myself, leave it in the chat and leave a question mark. That way we know that it's a question. Gary Cole, what's up, man? He says Harman 2013 or 2018. You guys know my answer to that, and I use a combined version of the two. Do you actually, on that subject, Super? We didn't actually get into it, but do you have a specific target curve that you really like, or do you just not care about target curves? Or yeah.
I haven't put enough. I've never sat down with a pen and paper and tried to draw out my preferred target curve. I think the Moondrop Blessing 2 is probably the closest.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the treble is probably where it deviates from what would be my preference, but
yeah,
I think that's about ideal for me.
Wait, Blessing 2 or Blessing 2 Dusk?
Blessing 2.
Ah, you were more about Blessing 2 than Dusk. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It's got a little bit more mid-range warmth and body to it that to me makes it. It doesn't sound like the HD 600, but I think it's a little bit like it kind of closes that gap. Whereas I think the Dusk, I like the Dusk a lot, but the Dusk, it just gets a little bit lean in the mid-range for me.
In the upper mids or in the
the lower mids.
Yeah.
Lower mids.
So where the contour is there slightly.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Oh, Android's gonna send me the G Buds Plus, maybe. Yeah, actually, I wanted to just sort of mention that as well, though, that like, you know, as for all of the squabbling that gets done online about what the ideal target curves are, the other side of this is that like we can just like listen to headphones and enjoy different types of tunings. Like just because something doesn't match a target curve, that doesn't mean we're not going to enjoy it. That's sort of been my take on a lot of this stuff. Like I like the HD 650, but it does not match, especially in the bass, right? So
yeah. You mentioned the Campfire Aura.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what curve that matches, but
it does not.
Yeah.
No.
But I listened to the one that Precog had a couple months
ago.
You
liked it, didn't you? Right?
I thought it was pretty decent. I think the quality of the bass shocked me.
It's for a BA, and it's not elevated at all in the bass, but like
no.
It was definitely tighter than I was expecting for a BA.
Yeah.
And
still not enough.
It's also got the, as Kryn calls it, the wibbly wobbly mids, which
that
is a bit of an issue. But I like the treble on it. I thought it was great, and I don't even think it's even a remotely close comparison between the. I'm firing shots over at Kryn here. He knows what I'm talking about. No, the Empire Ears Zeus, which I think was the comparable, and I just don't think that's even in the same ballpark. But the Zeus is just so strange sounding. All right, let's see. Let's get into some of these questions. Will any of you check out the Gold Planar GL 2000? Hype is fire right now. That is something I do not recommend.
I think Android just reviewed that too, right?
Yeah, he did. But, okay, so like it's not terrible actually. But the problem is the Sundara exists. And I don't see any reason why, especially the 2020 or whenever the pad change happened with the Sundara. I don't really see a reason to go for the Gold Planar if you could just get a Sundara, especially with the default tuning. With the default tuning on the GL 2000, it's really weird sounding. I don't know if you have you had a chance to try it? No,
I've not.
Yeah, no. The weird thing about that is that like there are two versions. One of them is single-sided, one is double-sided, and it's totally unclear which is which. So
what is the sided reference?
Sorry, for the magnets, because it's planar magnetic, and so there's a single-sided one which would be developed one way, and then there's magnets on both sides, which in theory should be better, at least if tradition has told us anything. But so my feeling is that I have the double-sided one because it's heavier. It feels heavier than the Sundara, and the Sundara is single-sided. Not that they're the same, but I suspect I have the double-sided one, and it is not competitive at its price point. That's really the problem. Let's see, more questions. Precog, do you see anything that you best IE? Oh, this is for both of you guys here. Best IEM under $400 and under $1,000.
Well, I'd say Dusk for under 400. And then Super would probably say Blessing 2, right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean those two. You could take either one. Like
they're interchangeable.
Yeah, and I can't think of anything at that price range or lower that I like as much or really nearly as much.
Mm-hmm. And under 1,000? That was the other part of that question.
Yeah.
I still haven't heard the. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just say for me it would be the Moondrop S8, but I haven't heard a ton, to be frank, in between that price range.
Okay.
Yeah, I still need to hear the Monarch and Clairvoyance. But
yeah.
I would say Andro, but it's like 1,100 technically. So maybe I guess M9, Sony IR M9. That's really solid. But yeah.
For me, it's probably the Clairvoyance.
That's the warmer one?
It's hard to say. I mean, they're not really warmer. It's like because the Monarch is like way more sub-bassy with a bigger bass shelf. The Clairvoyance is the one that's a lot more like balanced. Well, I say a lot more. They're very similar, but it's more balanced. And then the Clairvoyance also has better treble extension, at least on the unit that I have. So we'll send him over to Precog and get it measured on his coupler, because I use the RAO 402, which is different from the RA 055s. But yeah, and then the other one for me would be the SA6. I don't know. It has the U12T tuning, so like to me, I'm like, I love that.
Sucker for it already.
I'm a sucker. Yeah, I love that tuning. It's just, especially because like I listen to a lot of garbage, and like there's certain recordings where like the elevated ear gain there can, for like, let's say more technically neutral IEMs, can be a bit much, and the SA6 and the U12T, they just sort of like relax that section just a little bit, so it helps with like electric guitars and stuff like that. Okay, let's see. And actually, by the way, I just gotta say, I'm glad that there's a Blessing 2 proponent over the Dusk, because I think there's a lot of people who like, they bought the Blessing 2 and then like this same year Kryn comes out with the Dusk, and it's like, what?
Why'd you have to do that to us, Kryn?
So it's good that there's like, a balanced, perspective. Kryn says Sundara is better than the GL2000. I completely agree.
I think Kryn he confirmed that he had the single-sided version. I remember I asked you, I didn't know what single-sided versus double-sided reference, but I think I remember his review calling out single-sided.
Yeah. The other weird thing about the GL2000 is that it has two pads, and they do measure a little differently. They're very similar, but a little differently. But like when you take the pads off, it's over there. I'd show it otherwise. But when you take the pads off, there's this like weird felt material that just falls out. Like it's supposed to be stuck onto the driver, but it's not held there by anything other than the pad. So it's a real bugger to try and swap pads and measure it around, because you got to do that 4 times.
I mean, it can be difficult enough to tell the difference between pads if you make that process take twice as long.
Oh God, there's that, but then also even just because I was trying to measure it, right? So I have 2 different measurements with different pads and stuff like that. But and one of the pads, like I think the non-solid leather, like it's like this is like the solid leather pad for it here. And then there's also the hybrid pads, and I thought the hybrid pads did a little better for the tuning, but in both cases the mids were super hazy and grainy, and like the normally like planars do a really good job of instrument separation, and this one didn't. Like it was like somewhat smeared there for like the overall instrument separation there. So and just comparing it directly against the Sundara, no, not even close. Okay, we got tons of questions here. This is good. Someone's asking Super, what is your Grail headphone? The best headphone you've heard? Or the best headphone you've heard? Now we've covered that kind of, but like, I guess Grail headphone is like the holy grail of headphones for you.
Okay. My Grail headphone would be an IEM that sounds like this, I guess, with better bass extension.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, like, have you heard the Focal headphones, like the Clear and the?
I've only heard the Alere.
Okay.
Which was solid, but like I like the Sennheisers better. I've heard the Sennheiser HD 800, not the S, which I liked quite a bit. But I heard that it's sort of that same head-to-head that I was doing with the 600 series, and this was more comfortable generally.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think at some point it'd be awesome if you could review the Clear, just to see because like a lot of people say that the Clear is like, if you take a HD 600 or 650 and you upgrade it, that's like the most straightforward upgrade path. I don't know. To me, they are a little different though, because in as far as like the driver anatomy, it's very different. The Focals use the sort of like the hybrid style, whereas the Sennheisers are more traditional. But also like the punch and slam is different, and it's a different way of handling detail as well. So I'd be curious what your thoughts are on that, to see if it kind of, like meets.
I'm interested in checking that out. I'm also interested in like the so my friend has the K1000s, which frequency, FR wise, obviously have some deficiencies, but that's a really fun sound, and like the experience of listening to those is really unique. So like, if someone can do that with bass extension, that would be cool.
I'll see. We can see if we can, get you to review something else, like maybe a Focal Clear or a Utopia or something like that. We can send one down to Precog, and he can,
right on,
make something like that happen. Because
smuggle it in.
Yeah. Because actually, the Utopia is another one that's kind of like, there's a weird comparison with the HD600 there in my mind. That like for people who like the HD600 sound, I imagine there's some similarity with the Utopia. All right, let's see. Super should just use the perfect Antdroid IEM target trademarked as his preference curve.
I will do that. If anyone ever asks me to tune an IEM, I will use somebody else's tuning target.
I would probably use Krins for that. I don't know, Precog, do you have an ideal target?
Not really. No, I like U12Ts, but even I recognize that it has some issues here and there, like the upper mid range is a bit dip, but I like that personally.
Yeah, me too. That's the thing, like, and this is like, it goes against the grain a little bit, but like I like stuff that isn't necessarily perfectly matching the targets, and I like stuff that's not perfectly neutral, right? Like, all right. Just ask Zeos. He feels the GL2000 is better than the Susvarup.
Oh dear.
Oh no. Well, that's fun. To Super believe. Okay, yeah, we already got that. To Super believe he's in using specific IEMs for specific genres, or is he going for the best all-rounder?
Yeah, people will often ask me. I'm sure you get the same thing. Like people asking you for headphone, earphone recommendations all the time, and they'll a lot of the time start with the genres that they listen to. And I have a hard time personally making genre-based recommendations. I mean, I feel like even, I don't know, all genres are definitely, within let's say the rock genre, they're not all mastered and recorded the same. Like even within a given artist, album to album can sound different. So I generally have a hard time with that kind of framing of this is a good EDM headphone or this is a good classic rock headphone. I think my only exception is like there are, I listen to a lot of Erasure, and it's like this analog synth, and so there are certain earphones where like I like the way the analog synth mixes with it. I think BAs do it pretty well.
Interesting.
Where they might miss some of the texture and timbre of more natural instruments. So like there's like maybe an exception, but it's not really genre specific. It's more like Erasure specific.
Okay. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that because people often complain about the BA timbre. I complain about it, and it's interesting that you found something that actually pairs well with it specifically.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool. Somebody's asking what cable are you using for your HD600? And actually, I'll follow that up with are you a cable proponent?
That's right. This is a high quality Cardis. No, this is just some cheap $30 cable I got on AliExpress.
Does it
for me,
make the sound better?
No. For me, cable is all about convenience and tactile feel, and I wanted something that was shorter and wasn't stiff. So this is it.
Nice. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think cables are worth it if the ergonomics and aesthetics are something that you like.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to paying $100 plus or $200 for a nice cable, but it's not because it makes it sound better.
Yeah, in many
ways.
It's
not my experience.
Yeah, no, I just that's the thing is like I think there's a lot of this. I love your like high res placebo thing because like I think there's a lot of that goes into this where people convince themselves and just other biases that we don't even think about. Like I'm susceptible to this as well. I think everybody is, and but that's one that I think is like you can keep trying, like keep swapping cables, and at least I've never experienced that difference.
Yeah, I mean, if it makes a difference for some people, I'm totally happy to accept that. Like, I'm not going to have arguments about it,
Yeah,
but I'm not going to spend my money trying to
exactly.
do that.
Yeah, I loved Matt Economist's take on this, where he said, just because it doesn't change anything acoustically, that doesn't mean that it doesn't make things sound better to people who believe in it.
Right.
And it's like same thing with cited biases and stuff like that. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with attention, because you're paying attention to things that you probably weren't if you weren't thinking about that as a difference maker. And you could do that same thing if you just pretended that there was a difference. I don't know. But it's a different mental process, I think, probably. Okay, something else here. Questions about Dacs and amps. Actually, what's your go-to source equipment, I guess, like DAC amp stuff for the HD 600, for example?
Oh, for the 600, nothing fancy. I just have a shit Modi and a Valley, like the tube amp, which I chose specifically for the reason that it glows and it gets warm.
You got to try it off of something like this. You can't really see it behind me here with this.
Yeah.
Amps and sound, Kenzie.
I'm very interested in dipping a little bit more into tube amps, but I guess I don't have you should tell me. You should give me some suggestions. If I want to spend, I don't know, $500-600 on a tube amp, what should I get?
It's tough.
Is that enough? I don't know.
Yeah, like it's tough. I know Tyler's probably going to recommend the Bottlehead Crack. I don't know if he's still in the comments in the chat.
You have to build that one, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, or I mean, I'm sure you could get one that's already assembled. But I think the problem is that for the stuff that makes a real tangible difference, there's a big barrier to entry as far as price goes, because all the amps and sound stuff, like the Kenzie, the Pendant, well, that's ZMF, but like that stuff is all like $2,000 plus, and I'm gonna spoil my review of it because it's coming out soon, but the coolest experience that I've had with headphones, with dynamic driver headphones, is off of that amplifier, and I may even buy it. It's that cool.
Wow.
Yeah. But so what I was gonna say is the problem ends up being that, like, so much of the stuff that's more affordable, the differences aren't that, at least in my experience, the differences aren't that significant. Like, I know there's like the dark voice and stuff like that, and real heavy flavor stuff, including some of the OTL like Bottlehead stuff, which is probably worth playing around with, but I don't think it's the same kind of experience. So I mean, my recommendation would be probably also along the Bottlehead line. I think that's probably a way to go. Around the 500. I'm not sure how expensive those are, but given that you have to make it yourself, I mean, I think that's got to be part of the fun of it. I would recommend this.
Soldering gives me anxiety.
Oh, I know. That's why I can't. I'm like, ugh. But yeah, the Cayenne HA1 Mark II, HA1A Mark II, it would be a recommendation, as long as you have some way of like ensuring that it's on a different like table or somewhere other than where you're normally using it. Because like if I have it plugged in here and I just tap, or if I even just like hit the cable on something, you hear the vibrations in it. So it's extremely microphonic on the amplifier. But it is really versatile.
A rubber pad or something.
Yeah, something. I don't know how to fix it. It does have the feet on the bottom, so maybe rubber mat underneath. But the cool thing about it is that it's got so many different impedance selections that you can use. And in my experience, most of the actual sound changes that warm things up with these comes not from the tubes necessarily, but from the output impedance differences. And then this is why I was so surprised with the Kenzie. Its output impedance are 32 and 300. And when I use and in both cases, while in using the 32 ohm, it didn't change the frequency response at all. Like, it's dead on neutral, completely identical to a solid state source. With 300 ohm, it's like the bass gets boosted below 200 hertz by like 1 dB. So in both cases, it's very, very, very neutral, which surprised me quite a bit. So, and that's not the case on the Cayenne. It does, boost, and depending on the headphones that you're using, like if there's a 50 ohm 50 hertz impedance bump or something like that. But I do think also to keep in mind with that is the synergy with the headphones that you're using. So for the HD600, I know there are people who are doing the bottlehead stuff specifically.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why I would recommend that as well. Anyways, that was long-winded. Let's see. Most accurate vocal tonality in IEMs or headphones. What do you guys think?
I thought that was the dusk.
The word accurate,
Yeah, accurate is relative, of course, to what you hear, and that's the big like rabbit hole. But,
yeah. I would go almost with the Blessing 2 and Blessing 2 Dusk on those as well.
Yeah, I thought it was the dusk, like the ear gain on it, the way it gains, and then the way it slopes is just very, very accurate to what I've heard in real life, at least in my personal experience.
Probably accurate depending on the environment that you're hearing the vocalist in.
Yeah, of course that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll also give a shout out to ER4, which I don't actually listen to that much, but what I like about the ER4 is the mid-range and the vocal tuning is really good.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm not sure how much you guys have followed this, but the HiFiMan HE-R10 and R10P, the planar Sony MDR R10. The question is this a tribute or a blatant copy? What do you guys think?
I might feel different about it if I had history with the Sony,
right?
But I was not familiar with the Sony until the HiFiMan was announced, and so it very clearly looks. I mean, they even named it the same thing. I don't know how they. it seems weird, but I don't know. Maybe I'd be more frosty about it if it was a headphone that I had experience or history with.
Right.
I mean,
Precog,
personally, I don't really care, but like some of the stuff that Fang Bian, I think, was saying, like if you read the translation, what he was saying was, I checked, they cannot sue us for this because the copyright or whatever is like
it's expired. The patent
expired. Yeah. And I don't know, that just struck me the wrong way, kind of, but
yeah, because it's not about whether or not you can get sued for it. It's more about the principle and the positioning,
right,
like
exactly.
how this looks in the eyes of prospective buyers.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's
we're
it's
not
wild. Yeah, I mean, but I'm inclined to agree. Like, to me, if it sounds good, I don't care. I'm totally like, the original HER10 didn't sound very good, so that's the other.
Didn't?
No.
Oh wow!
That's the other.
To sound like super good or something.
No,
okay.
I mean it was a legendary headphone, but that was so many years ago, and back when people had no idea what headphones were supposed to sound like. So, I mean, these days we now have so many better headphones than that, and the R10. Even 10 years ago, we had better headphones than the R10. So, that's the other really weird reason to. I mean, maybe he's going specifically after the market that is old enough to know what that headphone meant back then, and say, hey, here's a re-envisioned version of that, which the frequency response is also really weird. So
how long before HiFiMan HEM50X is?
I want them to do that. Got HiFiMan Fang, do it. HEM50X. Let's make it happen. Okay. That's kind of my take as well. Like, I don't care about the whole debate about like, is it a ripoff? Is it a tribute? If it sounds good, that's all that matters to me. Let's see. I'm really interested to know if the FIO FH5 for $260 is an affordable little brother to the Theaudio Monarch. Crinical's graphs make their frequency response similar. Have you heard that?
I have supers right now, but it's got a channel imbalance.
Apparently.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
I mean, it does. I could tell it sounds pleasant, like nice, warm, and pleasant. But yeah, I can't tell exactly because I also haven't heard the clairvoyance side there.
That'll be over to you soon. So
yeah,
probably early next week, something like that. I'm also sending you some campfire IEMs. So.
Oh yes,
should be fun.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Have you heard the FIO Super?
Yeah, so like
It's
as
your, oh,
Precog
it's
was
yours,
saying,
obviously. Yeah.
he's got mine. I hope that it didn't have a channel imbalance when I heard it because I thought it sounded decent.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the bass presentation on it's pretty solid. The mid range is a little bit on the warm side, and like it's pretty nice, but it's maybe a little bit dark up top for my tastes.
Yeah.
So it can be a little dull, but it's nice.
Mhm.
I prefer in that price range something like the JVC FDX1, which is clearly a more brighter, it's a
But-
brighter
All
tune.
meaner. Yeah.
I mean, the other
Yeah.
side of it too is that like that's not that far off from the Blessing too,
Right.
right? You could save a little bit more and then get something that's like really good, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see someone potentially preferring the FH5 if like bass is their priority.
But also now there's the Theaudio L Legacy 4.
Oh yeah, I gave that to Super. Have you had a chance to listen to it yet?
I listened to it a bit this morning. Yeah, I would not put it in that same conversation personally.
Okay. Cool.
It's not bad though. It's good.
Yeah, but just different kind of sound. Yeah. What is the quickest way to 20,000 subs? Asks Critical because he's starting a YouTube channel.
Yeah. Review an iPhone. Review the Apple dongle. Like do it Crin style. That'll be good.
Talk about Pratt.
Or challenge Jake Paul to a boxing match.
Okay. Yeah. I think we should have like the headphone boxing matches. You know, people have like strong enough disagreements. They have to. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
I'll get Tyler in my corner. Okay, let's see. I think
I was going to say EQ versus no EQ.
EQ,
in which
exactly.
case
Yeah.
Tyler would not be in your corner.
Yeah, and he would win the fight too. Yeah, I think Crane will be fine. He'll get 20k subs pretty quick. Let's see. Mangard Tea, Fearless Tequila. Sub $400.
Yeah, no.
Oh, so Precog has done a review of the Fearless Tequila. Did you do the Mangard Tea?
No, people keep asking me about that though because it's a 4 balanced armature 1DD hybrid as well.
Okay.
So I do kind of want to get that in eventually, but yeah.
You know, it's funny. I remember reading one of Crin's reviews where he likened something. He said it to Mangard Tea. He said it had a kind of Mangard Tea kind of tuning, and I thought to myself, is this some sort of IEM descriptor that I don't understand?
Yeah.
But he was actually referencing a specific IEM.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like like the equivalent of milk toast.
I haven't heard the Mangard. I did hear the tequila via Precog for a bit. How much is that actually? I don't even know what the
Dude,
price
it was like 400, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Even if you look at the frequency response of that, it doesn't look like any frequency response ever.
No.
It is the strangest frequency response I've ever seen. It has detail. That's good. It has
yeah, in the lower mid range.
Lower
a little
mids, yeah,
bit,
yeah.
But the ear gain and everything is just wonky after that.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I totally even forgot. You got the ZMF Aeolus and O'Tour would be good upgrades to the HD 650 and 600.
Yeah,
Those
the
are other
O'Tour
ones
is
that-
actually that was one I picked out from looking at Chronicle's graphs when he updated the graph.
That's
earlier.
one of my favorite headphones too. It's the O'Tour's. Yeah, it's my one complaint with the Verite is that it's not an O'Tour on steroids. But yeah. Let's see. We'll do a few more questions here. We've been going for about an hour and a half, so yeah, a couple more. Do you think balanced interconnects? Oh, okay, balanced interconnects or balanced outputs. I'm just going to add that. Is there a benefit to balanced beyond just power?
I mean, I understand like the electronics or the electrical objectivity explanation for why it's better. Yes, I don't. In my experience, it doesn't really apply to the length of cable that I'm running. So personally, no, I actually kind of steer away from balance generally, just because it's less compatible. And like, I like the simplicity of 3.5.
I never understood the need for balanced outputs on DAPs, unless you're like, I do get it if you're using over your headphones and but for IEMs, I don't. Maybe someone can fill me in on why people will buy balanced cables for IEMs and like go with balanced everything.
I mean, the why is that there is an objective measure of why it is better, but is it perceptible? Is it a thing that you're likely to encounter in your life? I don't think so.
Well, but so in theory, the main benefit there is more power, right? More like you can have more power with a balanced output. But I don't know why that matters for IEMs.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I think that's like the practical benefit that you get with most apps, and that's more to do with just the way that they're, architected internally. There's no reason you couldn't have a single-ended that's just as loud as a balanced, right? It's just kind of down to the amplification and how you design that.
Yeah.
The theoretical advantage of balanced, right, is that if there are interferences, electronic interferences and stuff that happen, but like that's
less crosstalk and whatever else. And
but that's I'm not worried about that. With a 4-foot cable.
Yeah. I mean, my take on it has always been with, at least for like desktop amps like this one right here, there's a toroidal transformer in here that handles the balanced output. So if you want to make use of that, you got to use the balanced output. But it's not about the fact that it's balanced. It's about that's what this amp was designed to do. So like, whereas the single-ended ones they're not using that. So at least as far as I understand, I took a look at the opened up, photo of it. But in general, like I think it's more about the output specifically, and the design of the amp, not necessarily balanced versus single-ended, inherently. Okay, let's see. Is there? Oh, I mean, I guess I see why. Someone says there's a huge difference when you go balanced with the HD6XX. And again, I would say that it all depends on the amplifier. If you have an amplifier with a balanced output and you're going from the single-ended one to the balanced one is most likely going to sound better, unless it's just tacked on there for convenience, because some of them are, like a 4-pin or something like that. But like with a specific fully balanced, amplifier, the balanced output is most likely going to sound better. Has Andrew heard the Flux Labs? I have heard of it, but I have not reviewed them. Okay. Hey, Super, I'm in SoCal too. SoCal peeps.
Southern California.
Yeah. Do you guys... Okay, I'm not gonna... Do you smoke OG when you listen to music?
Okay. I'm actually glad you called out that question, because I saw it in the chat, but I didn't answer it. No, the answer is no, but it's funny. One of my favorite comments I ever got on YouTube, and maybe you'll appreciate this, Andrew, was someone just said, I can't tell if he's high or Canadian.
Yeah.
I mean, but no, I don't.
Yeah. It's funny because like so many people on, like I see it all the time on comments and stuff like that. They go, people will say like, "Oh wow, your pronunciation of timbre, it was correct. I would never have expected that from an American." And I go, "I'm not American." But I assume that my Canadian accent comes through when I say a boot and sorry and oh darn, oh bother,
oh darn,
oh gosh darn it. But maybe not strongly enough.
It depends on your frame of reference too. Like I think most people in the North America have a hard time picking apart Australian and British accents, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sure to a British person that's not difficult.
Yeah. I have a pretty easy time with Australian and New Zealand, the difference between those. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, let's see. Okay, couple more guys, somebody says, Precog, thanks for replying to my question on the Duno SA6 review. Just clicked purchase 5 minutes ago. Wicked. Hope you like the Duno SA6. Hope you guys, I hope Super gets to do a video on that.
I've done the SA6.
Oh, you did? Right. Okay. Well,
yeah. I liked it. I think the biggest problem for the SA6 is the S8.
See, I haven't done the S8, so I need to do the S8 now. Yeah. How much is the S8?
700.
Oh, it's a little more expensive.
A different price point.
It's a little more.
Yeah. And I mean, that's also in Monarch and Clairvoyance territory, so the Audio Twins. Do you still prefer, I think this is just for this might be for me. Do you still prefer the ZMF Verite closed over the ZMF Verite open? I do not have the ZMF Verite closed, but I would like, if I were to buy a Verite today, it would be the closed, just because I like the convenience of close back, and I bought the Verite when the close back was not available yet. So, so yeah, that would be my choice. Oh, okay. Here's a question it's a question for me, but I'm going to redirect it at Super. So the question is, what camera do you use to film? And I'm going to throw this over to Super and ask, you used to do photography and stuff like that. So what's your go-to camera stuff?
I mean, for most of my productions, I use Panasonic Micro Four Thirds cameras.
GH5 and stuff like that.
It's like the lower end versions of GH5. It's the G7 and the G85. But yeah, I use that stuff. Generally, it's super easy to use. The only downside is the autofocus isn't the best, so that's why I don't move around a lot.
Right. I love that guy, Camera Conspiracies channel for.
Oh yeah,
like, he's hilarious.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
What I love about him, and are you into photography? Like the fact that you watch
time.
that channel is okay,
big
cool.
Time, yeah.
What I love about his channel is that like it is the greatest like rebuke of a lot of why I got out of photography was that there's just so much just obsession with this stuff that like getting really into the details of things like, oh, this is autofocus is better, or oh, I can't do that because the screen doesn't flip out. And he's just like a parody of that, which is awesome.
Well, and also
it's a parody of real life.
Yeah, and also everything for him is just terrible. And and then he also is, he's not afraid to say that it's user error. But no, I use the Fuji X-T4 right now. But I think if I had to do, like if I was planning on doing the YouTube stuff when I bought a camera system at the very beginning, it would have been something within the Sony system. Or, I mean, Canon, yes, but Canon has, as Kelsey or whatever his name is from Camera Conspiracies points out, they have the cripple hammer problem. But I'd probably go with I'm just expecting it to like fly in from the side. No, probably something with the Sony ecosystem, because the autofocus is really good on that, and it's pretty easy to just not have to worry about that. Whereas even with the Fuji system, I got to worry about that a little bit, and I think with the Panasonics you do as well. So.
Yep. Here I'm using a Nikon Z6, however.
Oh, you are?
I've got an old manual Olympus lens on it.
A Nikon Z6. That's good. Wait, is that the one that has 10-bit if you record externally?
I think it does. I haven't done that.
Okay.
Like this is, I think, the first video usage I've used it for.
Yeah, looks good. Okay. Okay. Two more questions, and then we'll call it. When do you expect the Dunu Zen review? Actually, this is a good question for both of you guys. So Precog's, it's on his horizon. It's on my horizon. And for you, Super, is the Zen something that you're thinking about from Dunu?
Yeah, I'm very interested in it. I know it seems like I don't know if it's just coincidence, but it seems like there was a handful of these single dynamic driver earphones that kind of come out around the same time. The Illumination, the Zen, and then File even has like the FD5.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dunu's asked me about interest in the Zen, so I'm definitely interested, but I'm not sure. I don't think I have a schedule for receiving one or anything.
Okay. I'm curious as to your thoughts. I thought the Illumination was pretty good for the tuning. Kind of reminded me of like a 650, I think I said. But so far, like out of all the dynamic driver IEMs that I've heard, the Zen is probably the one that I would get if I were to get one. But see, the problem that I see with a lot of this stuff right now is that for as much as I appreciate the technical advantages of dynamic drivers, maybe not so much detail, but like as far as the other aspects, like the physicality and the dynamics and all that stuff, it's also like the tuning for them in many cases just not quite as meticulously done as it is on tribrids or hybrids and stuff like that. And even just like I think talking to Tom from Dunu about that, I think he was saying that like it's actually much more challenging,
harder, right?
Yeah, it's more challenging to do the tuning on dynamic drivers, and it makes sense. But yeah, the Zen is probably the one that I would buy, even though I kind of like the tuning better on the Illumination. The Zen is just, it's like the Illumination does all the stuff in the treble that I want, and the Zen does all the stuff in the bass that I want. So I'd probably lean more towards the Zen. But yeah, and also the Dunu's cable system is just so good.
Yep.
It's good.
Yeah. All right, and last question. Last one. Let's find a good one here. Let's see. Okay, this is for everybody. Is there anything that you guys are looking forward to in particular from CES this year? Which for me, the answer is not really, but only other stuff that the companies that I tend to follow would potentially announce. Like if Sennheiser's doing something, which usually all these manufacturers have something in the works for a big show like that. But also, actually, I'm going to follow that question up. So we'll answer that one. I want to follow that up with, if certain events start happening again this year, would you guys be keen to go to them, or is this still something that you're gonna maybe not do?
Oh, I'd be interested in going to a can jam or something like that.
You've never been to
I
one?
haven't been. No.
Okay. Yeah, me too. It's on the list.
And the CES, anything for either of you guys?
Not really. I don't really follow it too closely, honestly.
Yeah, it's weird. Usually what I associate with CES is electric cars, televisions, and sex robots. So
perfect. That's
probably the latter.
Yeah, not so headphone related. It's even better. Yeah. Sorry, I just see one more question here. I'm gonna grab it. Can a headphone be great but be tonally bad? My answer is no, but I will throw it over to you guys.
I guess it depends on how easily you throw around the term tonally bad.
Yep.
Like if I'm on it, like as much as I like the U12T, tonally it's not my preference, and like it's got some funk to it, in my opinion. So, but I would say it's a great sounding earphone.
So my frame of reference for that would be that you can have different tunings that are like maybe not to your preference or to what you imagine would be a different preference, maybe something more V-shaped, maybe something more linear, et cetera. And I think there are good and bad ways of doing each of those. And so I can listen to the harmonic Dyne Zeus somewhere. It's behind me somewhere, and I can go, that is not at all for my preference. But I don't think that this is tonally bad for someone who likes a warmer sound signature. Whereas there are other things, IEMs or headphones, where something the tonal balance is so wrong that I would actually say it doesn't matter who you are, it's tonally bad. Right. There's a bit of guessing involved in that, right? Because you don't know what people's preferences are going to be. But I think if something is like really like, okay, I know this is a bit controversial, but the Campfire Cascade is something that I think is just flat out tonally bad, and because of that, I just can't deal with it. The tequila, Fearless Tequila, is another example, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter who you are. Like, there's nothing that even remotely resembles.
There's no redeeming qualities to it.
The ear gain, or like just even like that's the thing, right? Like, as much as there's a lot of subjectivity as far as the experience goes in this stuff, there is some commonality as well, because we all do have ears at the very least, at least in like 99% of cases. So it's, at some level there has to be the pinna effect and the ear effect, right? And if it completely ignores that, or is just super wonky like some of these, like the tequila or the Campfire Cascade, then I think there's a reason to say it's tonally bad. And that does impede greatness. Oh, Critical says the LCD4 is a good example of this. I can't really say yes or no, because there have been LCD4s that have been totally fine for their tonal balance, and then there have been LCD4s like the last one that I measured, which was just there was something probably wrong with it. Actually, I would have probably sent that back. So yeah, I can't really comment on that. But yeah, I think it's, as you're saying, Super, it really depends on how you define tonally bad. is it not to your preference? In which case, yeah, there can totally be great stuff that's not to your preference. But if it's like, if you like narrow that definition a little bit to stuff that's really messed up,
right,
then that probably does impede its ability to be a great sounding thing.
Right, like I wouldn't throw around the word bad for the tonality of the U12T, even if it's not to my preference. But someone might, like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I think that's pretty much gonna cover it for today. I want to thank everybody in the chat for hanging out and asking your guys' questions, and a big thanks to Precog and Super for joining me on this live stream. And yeah, we'll be sure to do this again in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. I'm just gonna let the stream run out.